Okay, so I had this video idea since like July or August, but wanted to upload a few of these videos first. And wow, there's been so much stuff happening since then. First, Donald Trump got re-elected in the States, then Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, then Trump placed tariffs on Canada, Trudeau officially resigned, and Mark Carney stepped up. And just today, as of writing this opening section, March 20th, 2025, Mark Carney says he plans on calling a snap federal election for April 28th, just a few weeks from now. So instead of doing this video in the summer as planned, I'm going to enter crunch mode and see if I can make this video out on time. Well, I mean, you already know the answer, but I don't. So let's go. We don't have time to waste. The election system. Oh boy. So the way our system works is a little bit weird, but I'll just try to keep it simple and avoid all those asterisks. First off, the Prime Minister doesn't actually have a term limit, unlike the USA with the maximum of 2 terms. However, elections are required to happen every 4 years, similar to America. Except the Prime Minister has the power to call an early election if
they choose.
Which explains how we got an early election in 2021, pushing back the set election from 2023 to 2025. The election process begins once the Prime Minister presents to the Governor General a personal document called the Instrument of Advice, which recommends the Parliament be dissolved. Once dissolution occurs, both the House of Commons and Senate business is shut down, ending all activities. The Governor issues to all the ridings basically saying, yo, we're doing an election, get your crap together. Once that's settled, individuals who want to run in an electoral riding can apply either independent or with a party. A party can only choose one person per riding. On the voter end, a person does not get the option to choose the Prime Minister directly. Rather, they choose a member of Parliament who represents their riding and seat in the House of Commons. The party with the most seats forms the government, and they get to decide who they would like as the new Prime Minister. However, the way votes are decided is through the first-past-the-post system. Meaning if a specific riding has candidates being really close to each other but one is taking the lead by 1 point, that candidate takes the entire riding. Repeat that multiple times over the country and very soon you'll have a bunch of seats filled. However, there are 2 forms of government we should talk about, majority and minority. The line for determination is a minimum of around 170 of 343 seats. Saying around, as for the 2025 election, the minimum is 172. But a minority government can still win if no other party reaches that 170 mark. But this means they'll have to form a coalition with another party to stay in power, and once that is all done, the Prime Minister is usually put in office from a couple days to a couple weeks after the election, assuming things don't go awry. Time for the current political parties of Canada. Alright, I know how polarized people are, so to avoid as much of controversy as possible, I will just be talking about each party's main goals and some key details about them. I'll omit any current events and politicians because 1, this video will get outdated almost instantly, and 2, that's just a nightmare.
Times have changed! Our kids are getting worse! They won't obey their parents, they just want to fart and curse!
Founded on the founding date of our country, July 1st, 1867, the Liberal Party was one of the earliest groups formed. It is one of the 2 main political parties in Canada in opposition to the Conservatives and is currently being run by Mark Carney. On the political spectrum, the Liberals are on the center-left and they generally believe in the idea of liberalism, which is the idea that emphasizes individualism, political and religious freedom, cultural diversity, and gender equality. General equality. You know what, both work. Some notable actions taken by the Liberals have been things like improving social welfare, notably with the Canada Child Benefits to help lower-class families, and they also expanded the Canadian pension plan. Universal healthcare has been a thing that Liberals have been continuing to advocate for over the years, and through recent times, it hasn't been doing too hot. But on the other hand, Liberals have also been fumbling a lot of stuff, primarily the housing crisis, which I know is not directly their fault. This is a worldwide problem, but regardless, $3,000 a month for a standard house nowadays is insane. It doesn't help that the government is letting lots of new people come into Canada. Am I saying that I'm against immigration? Not at all. I believe people should come here to get a better life. However, we do need to regulate it and slow down the amount of people that are coming into our country, because it is a lot. And yeah, there's not a lot of livable space for people to actually inhabit. Yeah, Canada's big, but mostly just ice. That's why people don't live in the territories, except for 5 people. And also, they added the carbon tax to help reduce our impact on the environment, which isn't bad in theory, except why does it apply for people? Just make it for the companies. Charge them for the pollution. Alright, time for the opposition.
Should we blame the government or blame society?
Or should we blame the images on TV?
Although they existed in the 19th century, the modern Conservative Party, which is currently run by Pierre Poilievre, was founded in 2003 and they lie center-right to right-wing politically. They believe in the idea of economic liberalism. They want to lower taxes, have a small government, and low business regulations. Notable actions taken by the Conservatives during their leadership were things like reducing sales and income taxes, creating the Universal Canada Child Benefit, raising the age of consent from 14 to 16, Jesus, it took until 2007, and in 2008, the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, apologized on behalf of Canadians for the residential school system, which negatively impacted thousands of Aboriginal children. Although the Conservatives support the Canada Health Act, which emphasizes accessibility for healthcare, they don't like the idea of a national pharmacare plan, which in short would increase government spending and intervention along with higher taxes. In Canada, we have pretty strict gun control laws, but the Conservatives are very much against them and believe that to fix any violent issues is to regulate how guns are imported and prevent illegal gun smuggling. Just ban the damn guns. Time for the parties that have never taken main leadership roles in the federal government. The first one being the New Democratic Party, or simply the NDP. The NDP is a center-left to left-wing party that focuses mainly on social issues. Think of it as the Liberal Party, but way more saturated. The NDP supports the idea of broader social welfare, international peace, that's funny, expanding universal health care to things like dental care, mental health care, visual and auditory care, and prescription drugs. And also decriminalizing drugs in BC. Dear government, please fix the drug problem. I don't like seeing several homeless bums outside of my local Timmy's when I'm trying to grab Timbits. Thank you. They've also been advocates for things like gender equality and LGBT rights and whatnot. The drug problem is still bad though. Obviously I get it. It's like the point of it is to rehabilitate people instead of shaming them, which is good, but I feel like it could have been executed a lot better. What I think is the opposite of the NDP is the People's Party. They are a regular to far right-wing party that was formed in 2018 after their leader Maxime Bernier left the Conservative Party, saying what he believed that the party is too intellectually and morally corrupt to be reformed. The PPC never held any provincial or federal office, but has continued to advocate for itself, focusing on things like anti-immigration, wanting to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. During 2020, it ran opposition to COVID-19 lockdowns and vaccine passports massively, disliked LGBT-related stuff, anti-abortion. You know what? You get the idea. Let's move on. As you should know, especially if you live here, Canada has two official languages, English and French. And you should also know that the majority of that French exists in Quebec. Throughout its history, Quebec has had significant advocates for independence from Canada, mainly due to the contrast in Francophone and Anglophone culture. So that's why in 1991, the Bloc Québécois party was formed. The Bloc is a center-left party that, besides watching Quebexit, supports some things like lowering the voting age to 16, LGBT rights, Quebec independence, the abolition of the Canadian Senate and monarchy, Quebec independence, the legalization of assisted suicide, and oh, did I mention Quebec independence?
They're not even a real country anyway.
They care about the environment. That's pretty much it. They're neither a left or right party, just an amalgamation of social, progressive, fiscally conservative, and environmentally green ideas. That is it. And that is Canadian politics explained in a general nutshell. And regardless of who wins, whether that's liberal or conservatives, the others are not winning, let's be honest here, that we can respect each other, even if the views on our own cities, provinces, country, or the world are different. We are Canadians. We are supposed to be nice to each other. Let's show our neighbors to the south what real respect looks like. It's just politics. Don't get so bent out of shape because of it. Have a good one. Vote if you can. And I'll see you guys very soon. God, what month are we in? September? In the humongous 25? Wow. Also, sorry for the wait. I have just been absolutely brain dead trying to think of a good video idea. And I came across this. A COVID-19 retrospective. Also, I will say COVID is still very much around, but it hasn't been a pandemic since May 2023. So yeah, just saying. This video will be presented in a history lesson format, in a way, and it's going to be pretty weird, considering most of us lived through it, assuming you aren't watching this video in 2045. But that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to include a few personal tidbits from the time period, and include some guests while we're at it. So let's go. Okay, where do we begin? I guess from the virus itself. COVID-19. COVID-19 stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019, which is from the virus strain of SARS-CoV-2. The earliest cases of the virus can be traced back as far as November 2019 in Wuhan, China, likely caused from a zoonotic spillover from a bat at a local wet market, with most evidence supporting this idea. The virus continued to spread quickly around the country until early January 2020, when the virus hitched a ride out of the country and spread across Thailand and Japan. A couple of weeks later, officials confirmed the first case of COVID-19 had reached the United States after a man came back from his trip from Wuhan. On January 23, 2020, China realized that the virus had moved pretty fast and decided to put the city of Wuhan under quarantine, along with other cities within the Hebei province. Unfortunately, the virus continued to spread around, and after a total of 118,000 cases, 4,000 deaths, spread across 114 countries, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 to be a pandemic on March 11th, 2020. And from then on, things got stupid. But first, I want to mention a little anecdote I remember from grade 6, about a month before the pandemic. I remember my ICF teacher just telling the class something along the lines of, hey, so there's a new virus going around, don't worry about it too much, it should be fine. If you have it or whatever, just come to school, you'll be good. Okay, maybe not that last bit, but I do remember him being fairly relaxed about the whole thing, which I guess kind of makes sense. You don't want to scare a bunch of 12-year-olds for literally no reason, but I just think it's a funny little tidbit of information I remember. And speaking of schooling, let's start there. In the early days of the pandemic, due to quarantine and lockdown measures, many schools were forced to switch to remote or digital learning, which meant you were forced to use a laptop or tablet to access files and video calls using whatever software your school district assigned. My school had to use Microsoft Teams for all of that, and we would regularly go on to a video call with our teacher, who would explain whatever French or standard assignment we had to complete. And I remember for one of our math assignments, there was one very basic math question, and it was so easy that I even questioned if I read the assignment right. But nope, it was just really, really simple. It was like a first grade level math question that had something to do with frogs, I think. And you would just do that, rinse and repeat for 2 more months until the school year ended. Out in the real world, many governments and agencies began setting up protocols to help reduce the spread of the virus. Some of these included social distancing up to 6 feet or 2 meters, wearing a surgical or N95 mask, the aforementioned quarantine, and in some places, vaccine passports. Obviously, those were set up later when vaccines, were rolling out. Which, fun fact, the vaccines were developed pretty quickly, not through a government conspiracy where they were all pre-planned, but rather banger technology. Let me explain. The vaccine was developed through mRNA methods. The mRNA vaccine works by using the genetic code of the virus to make a pretend version of the spike protein, which is the part of the virus that attaches to the cells and harms them. This pretend spike protein is exposed to your body, which attacks your immune system, but it creates antibodies to protect against the actual virus. You got that? If not, go watch this TED-Ed video from 2021 that goes into further detail about the vaccine. It's in the description below if you want to view it. Moving on. Alright, now that we have all that covered, I'm going to get a couple of my YouTuber friends to tell some of their pandemic stories. Not anything too crazy, but just a little something to expand the video a little bit more.
So when school finally went back in person, they limited the number of kids that could sit at each lunch table for social distancing reasons or whatever. And the table I was at with all my friends just so happened to be one over that limit. When a teacher said someone had to move, nobody volunteered. So I figured, alright, I'll volunteer. Surely someone will come with me, right?
Oh no.
Turns out I gave my friends too much credit because not a single one cared and I ate lunch alone. So yeah, not a big fan of COVID.
Wow, what an enchanting, delightful tale, Vlogmations. Howdy, I'm Jack, and I want to discuss my experience with quarantine. I was in my first year of high school, and we all got sent home with the belief that it would only be closed for 2 weeks. Didn't go as expected. We were hardly allowed to leave the house for months. All I did was grind on Fortnite with the lads, animate, and pretend to pay attention on online classes. Anyways, back to you, Malcolm. Yes.
Alright, peak stories. Audience, give them a round of applause. I think we should talk about some other aspects of the pandemic, like the toilet paper stuff. Remember that? Honestly, I don't remember the toilet paper craze itself, but I sure as hell remember the aftermath of all that. That being that stores had to restrict how many of what items were being sold because people were snatching toilet paper by the forklift. Now, what actually happened was that at the start of the pandemic, many people believed that there would be impending shortages due to a potential supply chain collapse. However, in reality, there was no major disruptions to the supply chain, and also toilet paper wasn't going to disappear anyway. Mass hysteria is awesome. Alright, what else? Oh yeah, so like I mentioned in my internet video 2 years ago, I said that online school for me only lasted from March to June 2020, and I returned to in-person classes in the fall under heavy restrictions. And oh boy, that was interesting. Fast forward to September 2020, and I was not feeling too hot. In fact, I was sick. I had corona. I'm just pulling your leg. I did not have COVID. What I actually had was strep throat. Like, that's any better. But I knew I had strep throat because for some random reason, I'd usually get it like once every year. As of now, it's been a while. But I still was sent to school, And I remember coughing a bit, and my friend was like, "You have COVID," and then told everyone else that I did, which, looking back, whether or not I had COVID, they still sort of stayed away from me, and me from them. And, yeah. By the way, I did get tested with the spin in a cup version of the COVID test, so I didn't get to do the brain tickler. At least not then. God, I hated it. Cool, we covered the history, said some personal stories, yada yada, and there we go. And then the COVID-19 pandemic was declared over in May 2023, as I mentioned earlier, just over 3 years later. As a result of the pandemic, one major thing it taught humanity is that remote work and schooling is possible. Probably for the worst, to be honest with you. Again, I hated remote schooling. Another major thing the pandemic has done is increase depression around the world, with the main cause being social isolation. Again, take a look at the school system. In 2021, many schools started to reopen with many restrictions in place. Many students felt disconnected with their peers and began to suffer mentally. According to the CDC, in early 2021, after surveying over 7,000 students across the United States, they found that over 53.4% of students felt disconnected from their peers than previously, with the 46.6% remaining being the opposite. But hey, those were from 2021, so if I had to guess, they probably lowered, which means more people are back together. I think. Hopefully. But don't quote me on that, though. Post-isolation, many people seemed unsure how to interact with others again, which probably helped explain the whole devious lick trend around the same time, with everything feeling chaotic. People were looking for ways to release their pent-up energy, but that's just how I see it. Still, it was a stupid trend, but that's my rationale for it. But at the end of the day, it was still just theft. It was still stupid. And that is my 2025 retrospective on the COVID-19 pandemic. If you have any stories or fun anecdotes from the time period, feel free to share them in the comments below. Thankfully, life has been back to normal, as much as it can be at least, for quite some time now, and the pandemic is long gone, but not forgotten. Okay, technically it's not been undeclared a pandemic, just no longer a health emergency, whatever, screw you. It's no longer a pandemic, no one's wearing face masks anymore, and now we can relax, knowing that nothing like that will ever happen again in our entire lifetimes. Yep, we'll be completely fine. Hopefully. God damn it, I didn't even mention Among Us. Motherfuck. Karl Marx. He was born in Trier, Germany in the year 1818 and was of Jewish descent. He had far-left radical views and thought that Germany and Europe as a whole were corrupt and needed some change. He believed that society was unfair and that there was a ton of injustice, and in 1848, Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. Marx would later die 35 years later in March of 1883 at the age of 64 years old. However, his idea of communism would continue long after his death and would later get picked up by good old-fashioned Vladimir Lenin. Lenin shared the same far-left ideology as Marx and decided, hey, what if I made Marx's idea into an actual country? Nothing could go wrong at all. Spoiler alert, it would. You see, on November 6, 1917, Lenin launched the October Revolution. Wait, you said this took place on November 6th? Yeah, but the Russians were using the old-style calendar, which was October 25th, 1917. I'm saying November 6th to match our current calendar system. Alrighty then, I see. I don't know what I was doing with that voice. Anyway, Lenin thought it was a good idea to overthrow and take control of the previous Tsar government, which was led by Nicholas II. In the end, the Bolsheviks won the revolution, and this kicked off the Russian Civil War. This would last from November 7th, 1917, all the way up till June 16, 1923. This would all result in the Bolsheviks winning. A few months before the Civil War ended, Lenin already established the newly formed Soviet Union on December 30th, 1922. Even though the USSR was already established in 1922, many other nations wouldn't recognize it until years after formation. The reason? Well, people weren't particularly fans of the whole abolish capitalism thing the communists were setting up. Also the fact that the United States was largely turning a blind eye to the whole revolution. Uh-oh, it's the new year and Lenin just died of possibly a stroke or poisoning on January 21st, 1924. Now the Soviet Union needed someone to fill in the rank of leader, and unfortunately Joseph Stalin was like, hey, wouldn't this be perfect? And just took the job. Now why was this unfortunate? It was because that Lenin hated him and thought that if the Soviet Union was under his control, it would only make it worse. And well, he was right. Stalin would take control a few months later in April, and for the next few years, the Soviet Union was suffering from an economic crisis, food shortages, and lacking industrialization. Stalin pretty much said that this sucks, and made the amazing 5-year plans to make the USSR into a bustling nation. Which failed. By 1933, the United States finally recognized the USSR after 17 years of being completely ignorant of its existence. What made the United States finally recognize the Soviet Union was that President Roosevelt thought if they did, it would slow down Japanese expansion in East Asia, and also the US would have better relationships with the communist nations, so, just a little bonus. Hey, it's the late 1930s calling, and Nazi Germany is eyeing up its neighbors, and it was like, damn, Czechoslovakia is looking hella sexy, now I need to cop some of that. And so Germany did. In 1938, Britain, France, Italy, and Germany signed an agreement that Germany could annex the German ethnic side of Czechoslovakia, but since it was Hitler signing the agreement, he took all of it. Anyway, the Soviet Union stopped friendship with Germany, leading to the co-signing of the Non-Aggression Pact. In simpler terms, it meant we don't attack each other, maintaining our influence within Poland. The Germans, and soon the Soviets, invaded Poland in just 35 days from September 1st, 1939, all the way to October 6th. And then World War II happened, but this video isn't about World War II. In 1941, the Germans launched Operation Barbarossa, which would help them achieve more Lebensraum. Their operation was a partial success because they basically led the Soviets right back to Moscow, but then the Soviets pushed the Nazis back and then more battles happened. World War II began to die down when the Italians shot and beat up Mussolini, Hitler killed himself, and the United States dropped their bombs on Japan. Or at least that's a simplified version of what happened. Point is, the Allies won. Yay! Now we enter the end of part 1. Wait, what the? I didn't sign up for part 2s? Do you want this video up by January? Yeah? Then I'm splitting this into 2 parts. Also, I'm not even sure this part will make it out on time. My god. And we're back. Alright, where were we? Oh yeah, the beginning of the Cold War. So right after World War II, the Allies had a lot of work to do. So here's what they did. They established the United Nations in 1945, they expanded their nuclear arsenal, and Germany was split in 2 by 1949. And Berlin was split by a wall in 1961. West Germany was under control by the West, Britain, France, and the US, and East Germany was under control by the USSR. Berlin was split because the Soviets already managed to take control of East Germany because of the Second World War. They gave half of it to the West because they thought that they would get it back later, which never happened. If you want a detailed reason, Google is free. By this time, the United States was already fearing the spread of communism, and they wanted to contain it as much as possible. After the war, the USSR pulled back its relationships with the West, and in 1946, Churchill made the claim that an Iron Curtain has descended upon the European continent. The following year, the Truman Doctrine was signed, and it was basically like, yeah, communism is bad, and we should just make sure it does not spread over here. One of the first conflicts in the Cold War was the Berlin blockade. The blockade was caused by the USSR's weird logic, and they thought by blocking ground supply routes from West Germany to Western Berlin, they could force the Allies and NATO to abandon the city. In the end, the USSR stopped the blockade, as it clearly hadn't stopped the Allies to leave the city. Meanwhile, the proxy wars in Korea and Vietnam were happening. This caused the US to panic, and in an effort to contain communism, they directly intervened with the conflicts for freedom! The Korean War was an attempt for North Korea to unite the peninsula under a communist regime and the South under a capitalist regime. They pushed the South Koreans out of Seoul all the way to the port city of Busan, however the United States intervened with the conflict. Eventually, the Korean Armistice Agreement was signed on July 27, 1953, which established a demilitarized zone near the 38th parallel. The Vietnam War played very different than the Korean War. Instead of 2 professional forces facing off, it was pretty much just the North Vietnamese bullying the South into submission. The US tried to help, but due to pressure back home, they left, which ultimately left the North Vietnamese to win. Cuba in the 1960s would play a very vital role in the near destruction of the entire world. You see, there's this guy, Fulgencio, I don't know how to pronounce his name. You see, there was this guy,
Fulgencio Batista.
He was the former dictator of Cuba, but was overthrown in 1959 by Fidel Castro, who would establish a communist regime right outside the United States' back door of the Caribbean. Safe to say the United States wasn't really happy about this, so they immediately started training exiled counter-revolutionaries from Cuba, which were overseen by the CIA. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Soviets shot down a plane over Cuba, and officers inside a nearby submarine thought that war broke out and began the process to launch a torpedo. However, the authorization needed 3 people, and one man, Vasily, refused to authorize the decision and spare the world from nuclear war. The day before the US planned to invade Cuba, an agreement was made where the US would pull their missiles from Turkey and the Soviets would do the same from Cuba, thus ending the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, so as much as I want to talk about it, I'll have to save some time and brush over the space race a little bit. The USSR launched the first artificial satellite into space called Sputnik in 1957, and 4 years later they sent up Yuri Gagarin in 1961. The United States landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 1969, and pretty much just said that they won the space race, even though they didn't really do the other achievements. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last leader of the USSR from 1985 to 1991. Unlike the previous leaders of the Soviet Union, he was a pretty stand-up guy mostly. He decided to make some reforms to better the Union's economic and political stability. However, thanks to these reforms, another man named Boris Yeltsin decided to go behind his back and 3, 2, 1 dissolve the Soviet Union and form the Russian Federation. Okay, it wasn't that quick, but it pretty much was. What really went down was that one by one, each member of the USSR announced that they were exiting from the Union. The last one to leave was Kazakhstan on December 16, 1991. And officially on December 26, 1991, the USSR fell into different nations, and the largest being the Russian Federation. Today, communism in Russia and its former USSR territories has almost completely disappeared. And now in 2024, Russia is fighting a war with Ukraine, and in the Middle East, there's the Israel-Palestine thing going on. And yeah, no, I'm good. I'm not making videos on those. Alright, goodbye. See ya. Happy New Year. It's 2025, and I don't know about you, but for a while now, I've been viewing this year as the futuristic year. Just look at this number. Does it not scream the future to you? No? Well, that's fair. Most people probably don't think of the current year as the future, as we're living in it. However, just go back to the 1980s when people thought 2015 was so far off into the future. And now it's 10 years in the past. It sucks that I'll be graduating in 2026 though. I was just 1 year off from getting the cool grad year. Anyway, the point of all that is, it's the future now, and one hot topic is artificial intelligence, or simply AI. Also, this video won't be your typical educational video, it's just gonna be rambling incoherently. I'm gonna be honest, I'm pretty conflicted when it comes to AI. On one hand, for only really being mainstream for about 2 years now, it's very powerful. You can have complicated topics, articles, or equations boiled down to something you can understand. AI has improved virtual assistants like Google and Siri. You can use AI to create images with ChatGPT, Microsoft's Copilot, formerly Bing Chat, or Midjourney. You can also make video covers with Viggle.ai and make music with Suno. There are definitely a lot more sites you can use, these are just the ones that I know. Oh, and on the other hand, these tools can and have been used in bad ways. AI has been making scamming easier by taking people's voices and making them say bad things. It has also been used to make propaganda and help fuel ongoing wars and political debates. And in general, AI can just be used easily and horribly when put into the wrong hands. However, thankfully, despite all these horrible things AI can do, I haven't actually seen many people use it in such a negative way. So that's at least something. Most of the time I see AI used by the public is with memes. Here are some examples of these memes. The president gaming trend from 2023.
But I still want to fucking kill Donald.
Jesus Christ, man. What was that for?
The song covers by various real-life and fictional characters.
Where did you learn what it means to reciprocate?
How much can I be extended to the
The brain rot edits.
Lunchley is here.
Did anyone order the drippy cheese?
Or the Lunchley AI trend.
I like my cheese drippy, bro.
So I think because I run a channel that has to do with animation, I think I'm obligated to talk about AI art and whatnot. Now, what do I think of AI art? Like most things, I have pretty mixed opinions on it. I think it all boils down to how you intend to use the art. Like, if you can't draw something and you want to have a visual of it, then go ahead. But just don't go around saying that it's yours and that you created it and whatnot, because that's called plagiarism, whether or not it was created by a human or a robot. And also, I can't go around here saying that I'm against AI artwork and media, as I pull crap like this.
Oh, when the saints go marching in, then a piece of gold bar, Sasha speed jumped over car, last resent.
Granted, it is my own work, so it's not like I'm going around taking other people's stuff. However, this is helping the AI models get better and better, and now they have my data somewhere in their systems. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, as every single company in the world has everyone's personal data stored somewhere, so, capitalism, hell yeah! I have to hold my phone to record the audio, I can't clap. But I am against the idea of AI art just becoming the norm, and unfortunately people actually think AI artwork is for the better, so... Hey, what else? Oh yeah, using AI to write things. Whenever I make my video scripts, I never allow AI to write anything, but I do use it to help summarize or break down my script or sources that I'm reviewing for the more video, educational-esque videos. But you hear the little word, help? It helps when writing. It never takes a majority or even a quarter of the work. And that's all AI is, a helper tool, and it should be treated as such. And that's how I think AI will progress into the future. It will grow into a much better tool for information as opposed to the ancient and traditional work of looking it up on the internet. But if Google's Gemini has taught us anything, I think we still have a decent amount of time before we can let AI develop more into our daily lives. Yeah, I believe AI is here to stay and evolve, and if we can get governments to regulate and pass some laws around it, that'd be great. I don't see any post-apocalyptic AI takeover happening anytime soon. Honestly, I think World War III is far more likely. But hopefully neither of those come true and we get those cool buildings, flying cars, and high-tech stuff. I really want that high-tech future.